200 Apache warriors sat motionless on their horses, forming a perfect line outside Tobias Whitfield's barn. Not one of them moved, not one of them spoke. They simply waited, a silent, formidable presence. And in that deadly silence, every settler for miles around felt a primal fear grip their hearts, a chilling premonition that something had gone terribly wrong, upsetting the precarious balance of their world. Tobias pressed his back against the barn wall. His Winchester rifle, usually a source of comfort, now felt like a trembling extension of his own fear. Through a crack in the wooden boards, he could see them clearly. Painted faces, lances gleaming in the unforgiving morning sun, eyes fixed on his property with the cold calculation of predators sizing up their prey. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the backdrop of the unnerving silence. As one terrible thought consumed his mind, eclipsing all others, where was Emma? His 8-year-old daughter, with her bright spirit and endless curiosity, had been playing near the creek when he'd gone inside to check on the sick calf. That was barely an hour ago, a fleeting moment in time that now stretched into an eternity of agonizing uncertainty. Now she was nowhere to be found, and 200 of the most feared warriors in Kansas territory surrounded his farm, an impenetrable wall of silent power, their presence suggesting they were guarding something of immense importance, something sacred. The lead warrior dismounted slowly, deliberately, his movements radiating an almost regal authority. Even from a distance, Tobias could see the intricate network of scars etched across the man's chest, each a silent testament to battles fought and victories won. The eagle feathers woven into his thick black hair, a symbol of his unwavering courage. The way the other braves deferred to his presence, an unspoken acknowledgement of his supreme command. This wasn't some random raiding party driven by greed or thirst for revenge. This was something far more profound, more calculated, more unsettling. This was someone important, someone who commanded absolute respect, someone who operated with a purpose that transcended simple acts of violence. Tobias wiped the sweat from his forehead, his mind racing through a kaleidoscope of terrifying possibilities. Had they taken Emma? Was this some kind of twisted negotiation, a bartering of lives and land? Or were they simply waiting for the right moment to unleash their fury, to burn everything he'd built to the ground, leaving nothing but ashes and despair in their wake? The warrior began walking toward the barn, each step measured and purposeful, his moccasins making no sound on the hard-packed earth, as if he were a ghost gliding through the morning air. Behind him, the line of mounted braves remained perfectly still, like statues, carved from stone and shadow, silent sentinels guarding a secret only they understood. When the warrior stopped just 20 feet from the barn door, Tobias felt his breath catch in his throat, a physical manifestation of the fear that was constricting his lungs. The man's dark eyes seemed to pierce the wooden walls, as if he possessed an uncanny ability to see right through them, to know exactly where Tobias was hiding, exactly how terrified he was. Then the warrior did something that sent a shiver of ice down Tobias's spine, something that defied all his preconceived notions about the Apache. He spoke in perfect English, his deep voice resonating with an unexpected power, carrying easily across the morning air. "Tobias Whitfield, I am Standing Eagle of the Mescalero Apache. We need to talk." The fact that this warrior knew his name, knew exactly who he was, as if he were a character in some preordained drama, sent a wave of cold dread washing over Tobias. But what terrified him more was the tone in Standing Eagle's voice. It wasn't threatening, it wasn't angry, it was something far more unsettling. It was respectful, almost mournful. Standing Eagle continued, his words deliberate and clear, each syllable carefully chosen, carrying the weight of untold centuries. "Your daughter, she did something yesterday that my people have never seen from a white child, something that demands our attention, something that has shifted the very ground beneath our feet." Tobias felt the world tilt beneath him, the familiar landscape of his life suddenly becoming alien and treacherous. Whatever Emma had done, whatever innocent mistake his little girl had made, it had somehow reached the attention of one of the most powerful Apache leaders in the territory, a man whose name was whispered in fear and respect around campfires and in saloons. And now, with 200 warriors at his command, Standing Eagle had come to collect on that debt, to claim what he believed was rightfully his. But what could an 8-year-old girl possibly have done to summon this kind of attention? And why did Standing Eagle sound like he was here to honor something rather than punish it? As if Emma's actions had triggered a prophecy long foretold? Tobias's hands shook uncontrollably as he gripped his rifle tighter, his knuckles white against the worn wood. Every instinct screamed at him to stay hidden, to wait for the cavalry, to do anything except face 200 Apache warriors alone. But Standing Eagle's words echoed in his mind, a relentless drumbeat against his fear. Something about Emma, something she had done that demanded their attention, something that had irrevocably altered the course of his life. Taking a shuddering breath, Tobias stepped out from behind the barn, bracing himself for the onslaught he expected. The moment he appeared, every Apache warrior shifted slightly on their horses, hands moving closer to weapons. But none drew them. They simply watched, their eyes unwavering, waiting for their leader's command, their silence more menacing than any war cry. Standing Eagle studied Tobias with intense dark eyes, taking in his worn clothes, his calloused hands, the lines etched on his face by years of hard work and relentless worry, the way he held his rifle like a man who knew how to use it, but prayed he wouldn't have to. When the Apache leader spoke again, his voice carried an unexpected weight, a burden of history and tradition that settled heavily on the morning air. Yesterday at sunset, one of my warriors was dying beside the creek that runs through your land. Tobias felt his stomach drop, a cold stone sinking into the pit of his despair. A dying Apache warrior on his property? If the territorial authorities found out, they'd blame him for harboring the enemy, accuse him of treason and collaboration. But if he'd turned the warrior away, knowing he was suffering, these 200 braves would have come for vengeance instead of whatever this strange, unsettling encounter was. Lone Wolf had been shot by buffalo soldiers 3 days prior, Standing Eagle continued, his voice devoid of emotion, simply stating a painful truth. He crawled many miles, seeking a place to die with dignity, away from the eyes of his enemies. He chose the shade beneath the cottonwood trees near your creek. The cottonwood grove, Emma's favorite place to play with her dolls, to collect pretty stones, to build little houses out of mud and sticks, a sanctuary of childhood innocence now tainted by death and the looming threat of war. Tobias's throat went dry as he realized the implications, the terrible, unavoidable convergence of his daughter's innocent world and the brutal reality of the frontier. "My daughter," he started, his voice barely a whisper, but Standing Eagle raised a hand for silence, his gesture commanding absolute obedience. "Your daughter found him there, a small white girl with hair like corn silk and a blue dress torn at the hem." Standing Eagle's description was precise, almost photographic, unmistakably Emma. Lone Wolf expected her to scream, to run, to bring men with guns, to react with the fear and prejudice that had poisoned the relationship between their peoples for generations. Instead, the Apache leader paused, and for a moment, something almost like wonder crossed his weathered features, a flicker of genuine amazement that softened the harsh lines of his face. Instead, she sat beside him. When she saw that he was cold, that he was shivering as death approached, she took the blanket from her small shoulders, a blanket made of soft wool, obviously precious to her, a tangible symbol of her mother's love, and she covered him with it. Tobias felt the air leave his lungs, a crushing weight on his chest. Emma's blanket, the one her mother had sewn before she died, the one Emma carried everywhere, the one she couldn't sleep without. A piece of her heart made tangible. She had given it to a dying Apache warrior, an act of selfless compassion that defied all logic and expectation. She stayed with him, Standing Eagle continued, his voice growing softer, almost reverent. She held his hand as he passed into the spirit world, offering him comfort and solace in his final moments. She sang to him, a white child's lullaby, a melody of peace and acceptance, until his breathing stopped, until the last spark of life flickered and died. Then she placed wild flowers on his chest and whispered words of peace over his body, honoring his spirit with a grace and understanding that belied her young age. The implications hit Tobias like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of him. His 8-year-old daughter had not only shown kindness to a dying enemy warrior, she had performed what sounded suspiciously like an Apache burial rite, an act of profound respect and spiritual significance. Without knowing it, without fully understanding the gravity of her actions, Emma had honored a warrior's death in a way that would resonate deeply with his people, an act of uncalculated generosity that transcended the boundaries of culture and conflict. Standing Eagle stepped closer, and now Tobias could see something unexpected in the warrior's eyes. Not anger, not threat, but genuine gratitude, a deep and abiding appreciation for the compassion his daughter had shown. "No white person has ever shown such honor to one of our dying warriors. Your daughter gave Lone Wolf something more precious than gold. She gave him dignity in death, comfort in his final moments, and respect for his spirit, a gift that will echo through the generations of our tribe." But then Standing Eagle's expression grew serious again, the lines on his face deepening, and Tobias felt a chill run down his spine, a premonition of the storm to come. "However, there is a problem, Tobias Whitfield, a problem that brings us here today, a complication that threatens to shatter the fragile peace your daughter has unknowingly forged." The word problem hung in the air like a death sentence, a dark cloud overshadowing the fragile hope that had begun to blossom in Tobias's heart. He felt his grip tighten on the Winchester as his mind raced through terrible possibilities, each more horrifying than the last. What kind of problem could Emma's act of kindness have created? What ancient Apache custom had she unknowingly violated, unleashing a chain of events that he couldn't possibly control? Standing Eagle seemed to read the fear in Tobias's eyes, his gaze unwavering, penetrating the depths of his soul. "When we found Lone Wolf's body this morning, we also found something that changes everything, a discovery that has forced our hand, compelling us to act in accordance with laws that are older than time itself." The Apache leader reached into a leather pouch at his side and withdrew something that made Tobias's heart stop, a wave of nausea washing over him. It was Emma's blue hair ribbon, the one her mother had given her, the one she wore every single day, a tangible reminder of a love lost too soon. But there was something terribly wrong with it. Dark stains covered the fabric, stains that looked suspiciously like blood, a chilling premonition of violence and suffering. "Your daughter left this beside his body," Standing Eagle said, holding the ribbon up to catch the morning light, the fabric shimmering with a sinister crimson glow. "But these stains, they are not from Lone Wolf's wounds. They tell a different story, a story of sacrifice and pain that we cannot ignore." Terror flooded through Tobias as the implications became clear, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with horrifying precision. The blood on Emma's ribbon meant she had been hurt, possibly badly hurt, perhaps even fatally wounded. His little girl could be lying somewhere injured or worse, and he'd spent the morning hiding in his barn instead of searching for her, paralyzed by fear and ignorance. "Where is she?" Tobias demanded, taking a step forward despite the 200 warriors surrounding them, his voice raw with desperation, fueled by a primal instinct to protect his child. "Where is my daughter? Tell me what you've done with her!" Standing Eagle's expression remained unreadable, his face a mask of stoic determination. "That is what we need to discuss. You see, according to Apache law, when someone shows such honor to our dead, they become part of our tribe, bound to us by a spiritual connection that transcends blood and kinship. Your daughter's actions have bound her to us in ways that white men do not understand, forging a link that cannot be easily broken." The words hit Tobias like a physical blow, a crushing weight on his chest. Apache law, tribal bonds. They weren't here to thank Emma for her kindness. They were here to claim her, to assert their ancient right over the child who had dared to bridge the divide between their worlds. "She's 8 years old," Tobias said, his voice cracking with desperation, pleading with a force he didn't understand. "She doesn't understand your laws or customs. She was just being kind to someone who was suffering, acting on the pure, unadulterated compassion of a child. Which is precisely why her actions carry such weight," Standing Eagle replied, his voice unwavering, as implacable as the mountains themselves. "Kindness shown without expectation of reward, compassion given to an enemy without hope of gain, These are the marks of a true Apache heart, the qualities we value above all others. By our ancient customs, she now belongs with us, woven into the fabric of our tribe, a daughter of the Mescalero Apache. Behind Standing Eagle, the 200 mounted warriors remained perfectly still, but Tobias could feel their presence like a suffocating weight pressing down on him, a tangible manifestation of the unwavering will of an entire people. These weren't negotiating terms. They were stating facts, laying claim to what they believed was rightfully theirs. In their minds, Emma was already one of them, an adopted daughter claimed by the ancient laws of their tribe. But there is another complication, Standing Eagle continued, and somehow his tone grew even more serious, his voice laced with a hint of regret. The blood on this ribbon tells us that your daughter was injured while caring for Lone Wolf. She may be hurt, possibly badly. We need to find her quickly before it's too late. The thought of Emma bleeding, scared, and alone sent panic coursing through Tobias's veins, a tidal wave of fear threatening to overwhelm him. Then let's stop talking and start looking. Every minute we waste here could be— No! Standing Eagle's voice cut through his desperation like a blade, sharp and unforgiving. You do not understand the situation. If we find your daughter and she is badly injured, Apache law demands that we care for her as one of our own. That means taking her back to our camp, healing her with our medicine, raising her as an Apache child, immersing her in our culture and traditions, separating her from your world forever. The full horror of the situation crashed down on Tobias, a devastating realization that left him reeling. Emma was hurt and missing, her fate hanging precariously in the balance. The Apache wanted to claim her as tribal property, bound by ancient laws he couldn't comprehend, and even if they found her alive, their customs might require them to take her away from him forever, severing the bond between father and daughter. Standing Eagle studied Tobias's anguished face for a long moment, his expression unreadable, before speaking again, his voice softening slightly, offering a sliver of hope amidst the despair. However, there is one way this can be resolved differently, one path that honors both Apache law and a father's love, a compromise that may allow us to find a solution that satisfies all parties. Hope flickered in Tobias's chest, a fragile ember in the darkness, but Standing Eagle's next words extinguished it immediately, plunging him back into the depths of despair. You must prove yourself worthy of raising an Apache daughter. You must complete 3 tests that demonstrate you understand our ways, our values, our connection to the spirit world. Only then can you keep the child who has become one of us. Only then can you reclaim your daughter from the grasp of our ancient laws. Tobias felt the ground shift beneath his feet, the world tilting on its axis. 3 tests, Apache trials that could involve anything from combat to spiritual orals to impossible quests, challenges designed to break him, to expose his ignorance and unworthiness. And if I failed? What happens if I refuse? He asked, though he already knew the answer, the dread building in his chest with each passing second. Standing Eagle's expression grew stone cold, his eyes hardening into chips of obsidian. Then we take the girl when we find her, and you never see her again. She will become Apache, raised as one of our own, and you will be left with nothing but the memory of what you have lost. From somewhere in the distance came a sound that made both men freeze, a sound that cut through the tension of the moment like a knife. The faint, unmistakable cry of a child calling for help, a desperate plea that shattered the morning silence. The child's cry pierced the air again, weak and desperate, filled with pain and terror. Both Tobias and Standing Eagle turned toward the sound, their attention drawn to the direction of the old mine shaft about half a mile east of the property, a place of darkness and danger, a gaping maw in the earth that swallowed dreams and hopes. Without thinking, Tobias started running toward the sound, fueled by a primal instinct to protect his child, but Standing Eagle's iron grip on his arm stopped him cold, his strength surprising. "Wait," the Apache leader commanded, his voice firm and unwavering. "This could be a trap. Buffalo soldiers have been known to use wounded children as bait to draw our warriors into ambushes, exploiting our compassion to lure us into deadly confrontations." Tobias stared at him in disbelief, his mind struggling to comprehend the possibility that someone would use a child's pain as a weapon. "That's my daughter crying. I don't care if it's a trap. I'm not leaving her out there to suffer alone." But Standing Eagle's grip remained firm, his resolve unyielding. "If you charge in blindly and get yourself killed, who will complete the tests? Who will prove worthy of raising an Apache daughter? Think like a father, not like a fool. Your impulsiveness could condemn her to a life among us, forever separated from you." The logic was brutal but undeniable. If Tobias died trying to reach Emma, she would automatically become Apache property, claimed by their laws, lost to him forever. But every second of delay felt like a betrayal of everything a father should be, a violation of the sacred trust between parent and child. Standing Eagle raised his hand, and immediately 20 Apache warriors dismounted and began moving toward the mine shaft in a coordinated pattern, their movements fluid and precise, honed by years of experience in the unforgiving landscape. They moved like shadows, disappearing and reappearing behind rocks and scrub brush, advancing with deadly efficiency, their senses heightened, alert to any sign of danger. "They will secure the area," Standing Eagle explained, his voice calm and reassuring, despite the urgency of the situation. "If it is safe, we will retrieve your daughter. If it is an ambush..." He let the implication hang in the air, a chilling reminder of the stakes involved. Tobias watched in amazement as the Apache scouts vanished into the landscape like they had never existed, blending seamlessly with their surroundings. These weren't savage raiders as the newspapers portrayed them. They were skilled military tacticians with decades of experience fighting both Mexican and American forces, masters of survival in a world that sought to destroy them. Within minutes, one of the scouts reappeared and signaled back to Standing Eagle, his expression grim, his message urgent. The Apache leader's expression grew even more somber, his face etched with concern. "She is there. She is alive, but she is trapped, caught in a web of danger that threatens to consume her." Relief and terror fought for control in Tobias's chest, a conflicting surge of emotions that left him breathless. Trapped. "The old mine shaft has partially collapsed. Your daughter fell through rotted boards that covered the entrance, plunging into the darkness below. She is approximately 15 feet down, and loose rocks continue to fall around her, a constant threat that could crush her at any moment. Any wrong movement could bring down the entire shaft, burying her alive." The situation was worse than Tobias had imagined, a nightmare scenario unfolding before his very eyes. The old mine had been abandoned for years, its wooden supports rotting and unstable, neglected and forgotten. If Emma had fallen through the covering board, she was now trapped in what was essentially a death trap waiting to collapse, a confined space filled with peril and uncertainty. "We need ropes, supports, something to shore up the shaft walls," Tobias said, his mind racing through rescue possibilities, desperately searching for a solution. But Standing Eagle shook his head, his expression grave. "There is no time for such preparation. The scouts report that the remaining supports are failing, groaning under the weight of the earth. We have perhaps 20 minutes before the entire structure collapses and buries your daughter alive, crushing her beneath tons of rock and debris." The impossible choice crystallized in Tobias's mind, a devastating dilemma that left him paralyzed with fear. A hasty rescue attempt might trigger a complete cave-in and kill Emma instantly, ending her life in a horrific tragedy. But waiting for proper equipment would guarantee her death as the mine shaft crumbled around her, slowly suffocating her in the darkness. Standing Eagle studied Tobias's anguished face, his eyes filled with a mixture of compassion and unwavering resolve, then spoke with quiet intensity, his words carrying the weight of generations. "This is your first test, Tobias Whitfield. Not the test I planned, but the test the spirits have given us. A trial by fire that will determine your worthiness. You must choose. Attempt an immediate rescue that risks killing your daughter instantly, or trust Apache methods that you do not understand and may not believe in, surrendering to the wisdom of our ancestors." "What Apache method?" Tobias demanded, his voice laced with desperation, clinging to the hope that there was a way out of this impossible situation. "Our medicine man, Silent Thunder, believes he can speak to the spirits of the mine, ask them to hold the rock steady long enough for a rescue, to appease the ancient forces that govern the earth. But this requires absolute faith, a complete surrender of doubt and skepticism. Any doubt, any interference from you, and the spirits will not listen, and your daughter will be lost forever. Tobias felt his rational mind rebelling against the suggestion, his scientific understanding clashing with the mystical beliefs of the Apache. Spirit communication, talking to rocks. It sounded like superstition, like the kind of primitive beliefs that civilized men had moved beyond, a rejection of logic and reason. But then Emma's voice drifted up from the mine shaft again, weaker now, more frightened, filled with a desperate plea for help, and Tobias realized he was facing an impossible decision. Trust in Apache's spiritual beliefs he didn't understand, surrendering to the wisdom of a culture he had always dismissed, or rely on conventional rescue methods that might not work in time, potentially condemning his daughter to a slow and agonizing death. Standing Eagle's dark eyes bored into his, demanding an answer, forcing him to confront the limits of his own understanding. What is it worth to you, white man? Your daughter's life or your pride? Are you willing to sacrifice your skepticism for the chance to save her soul? If you were to buy us, what would you do? Trust in mysterious Apache spiritual methods you don't believe in? Or stick with conventional rescue techniques that might take too long? Tell me in the comments. I need to know which side you'd choose, because what Tobias decided next would determine whether Emma lived or died in the next 20 minutes. Tobias closed his eyes for a moment, wrestling with everything he'd been taught about science, reason, and civilized thinking, battling the ingrained prejudices that had shaped his worldview. But when he opened them and heard Emma's weak voice calling "Daddy" from deep in the earth, a sound that resonated with pure, unadulterated love, all his rational beliefs crumbled, shattered by the overwhelming power of his paternal instinct. "Tell me what to do," he said quietly, surrendering to the wisdom of the moment. Standing Eagle nodded with something that might have been respect, a flicker of understanding in his dark eyes. "First, you must understand, Silent Thunder is not just our medicine man. He worked in these very mines 20 years ago, before the Apache Wars began, when the land was still shared between our peoples. He knows every shaft, every support beam, every weak point in this entire mountain. He understands the language of the earth, the whispers of the stone." Relief flooded through Tobias, a wave of hope washing over him. This wasn't just spiritual mysticism, it was practical knowledge combined with Apache beliefs, a fusion of ancient wisdom and tangible understanding. Silent Thunder actually understood the physical structure of the mine, possessing a unique insight that could be the key to saving Emma's life. An elderly Apache man appeared as if from nowhere, his face deeply lined, etched with the wisdom of years, but his dark eyes sharp and alert, filled with an unwavering intensity. He carried a leather pouch filled with what looked like colored stones and small bones, objects imbued with spiritual significance. Without speaking, he knelt at the edge of the mine shaft and began placing the objects in a precise pattern around the opening, creating a sacred circle that seemed to hum with energy. "He is asking the mountain spirits to hold steady," Standing Eagle translated, his voice hushed with reverence. "But more importantly, he is listening to the sounds the mine makes, feeling for vibrations that tell him which supports are about to fail, using his intimate knowledge of this place to anticipate the Earth's next move." Tobias watched in fascination as Silent Thunder's weathered hands moved over the rocks around the shaft opening, his fingers dancing across the surface with a delicate touch. The old man's fingers seemed to read information from tiny shifts in the stone, minute changes in temperature, almost imperceptible vibrations, translating the Earth's silent language into a tangible understanding. "Emma!" Tobias called down into the darkness, his voice trembling with anxiety. "Can you hear me, sweetheart? Can you tell me what's happening?" "Daddy." Her voice was weak but clear, a beacon of hope in the darkness. "I'm scared. My leg hurts really bad and I can't move. And there's rocks falling." Her voice was now softer. Silent Thunder spoke rapidly to Standing Eagle, his words urgent and filled with concern. Standing Eagle translated immediately. "She is on a narrow ledge about 15 feet down, clinging to life by a thread. Her left leg appears to be broken, a painful injury that limits her mobility. but she is not in immediate danger of falling further. However, the support beam directly above her is cracking, groaning under immense pressure. We have perhaps 10 minutes before it fails, before the entire structure collapses and buries her alive. 10 minutes. Tobias felt panic clawing at his throat, a suffocating wave of despair. He forced himself to stay calm, to focus on the task at hand, to trust in the wisdom of the Apache. What do we do? What is the plan? Someone light enough to not trigger a collapse must go down to her, Standing Eagle said, his voice grave. But they must also be strong enough to lift her out, and they must move with absolute precision, avoiding any sudden movements that could destabilize the fragile structure. One wrong step, one moment of hesitation, and the entire shaft comes down, crushing her beneath tons of rock and debris. Standing Eagle gestured to one of his warriors, a young man who couldn't have weighed more than 140 pounds, but whose lean frame was clearly all muscle, his movements radiating strength and agility. Swift Hawk will make the descent. He has done this before in cave rescues, displaying remarkable courage and skill. But Tobias shook his head, his resolve unwavering. No, she's my daughter. She's terrified and hurt. If a stranger tries to grab her, she might panic and move at the wrong moment, potentially triggering a collapse. It has to be me. I'm the only one she'll trust implicitly. You weigh too much, Standing Eagle said bluntly, his words devoid of emotion. Your weight will collapse the ledge she's on, dooming both of you. Then teach me how to move like you do. You've seen your men disappear into this landscape like ghosts, moving with a grace and fluidity I've never witnessed. Show me how to make myself lighter, how to read the mind the way Silent Thunder does, how to become one with the earth. Standing Eagle studied him for a long moment, his eyes searching, probing the depths of his soul. This is dangerous beyond anything you understand. One mistake. She's my daughter. I want her safe. I won't let her die thinking her father abandoned her, that I wasn't willing to risk everything to save her. Silent Thunder spoke again, his words urgent and filled with a desperate plea. Standing Eagle's translation sent ice through Tobias's veins. The cracking is accelerating. 8 minutes, no more. The spirits are weakening. The earth is growing restless. Without another word, Standing Eagle began stripping off Tobias's heavy boots, his thick belt, anything that added unnecessary weight, reducing him to his bare essentials. Apache method. You become part of the mountain, not something fighting against it. Feel for solid stone before each step. Distribute your weight across the maximum surface area. Move like water, not like a man, flowing with the contours of the earth. He handed Tobias a length of braided leather rope, strong and supple, worn smooth by years of use. This will hold your weight and hers together, but only if the anchor points remain stable. Trust in its strength, and trust in your own. Tobias looked down into the dark mouth of the mine shaft, a gaping abyss that seemed to swallow all hope and light, where his 8-year-old daughter waited in pain and terror, her life hanging precariously in the balance. In 8 minutes, the whole thing would collapse, burying her alive. He had one chance to get this right, one opportunity to prove himself worthy of being her father. As he prepared to lower himself into the darkness, Silent Thunder grabbed his arm and spoke directly to him in broken English, his eyes filled with an ancient wisdom. Mountain spirits, they test your heart. You go down as white man, you come up as father. Trust the stone, trust your daughter, trust Apache way. If you're loving this story and need to see how Tobias saves Emma, make sure to subscribe to the channel because this rescue attempt is about to get even more intense. Tobias took his first step into the mine shaft and immediately felt the entire structure shudder around him, a violent tremor that shook him to his core. The shudder that ran through the mine shaft felt like the mountain itself was taking a breath, a deep, agonizing sigh that foretold impending doom. Tobias froze, his bare feet pressed against the wooden ladder rungs. Every muscle in his body tensed as he waited to see if his movement had triggered a collapse, his heart pounding in his ears. Above him, Silent Thunder's chanting grew more intense, his voice rising in a powerful crescendo, as if he were battling the very forces of nature, and somehow, impossibly, the groaning of stressed timber began to quiet, the ominous creaks and snaps fading into a more subtle murmur. The old medicine man wasn't just performing a ritual, he was using sound to monitor the structural integrity of every beam and support in real time, a living seismograph attuned to the Earth's every tremor. "Daddy," Emma's voice drifted up from below, small and frightened, barely audible above the din of the mine. "I heard something breaking. It sounds like it's right above me." "I'm coming, sweetheart," Tobias called softly, forcing calm into his voice, projecting a strength he didn't feel. "Just stay very still for me, okay? Don't move anything except your mouth. I'm almost there." He continued his descent, testing each rung before putting his full weight on it, feeling for any sign of weakness or instability. Standing Eagle had been right. Moving like the Apache wasn't just about stealth. It was about understanding the environment around you, feeling for weakness before it could kill you, becoming one with the earth. At 10 feet down, Tobias could finally see Emma in the dim light filtering from above. Her small figure huddled on a narrow stone ledge, her left leg bent at an unnatural angle, a stark reminder of her suffering. Her face was streaked with tears and dirt, but she was alive, conscious, and looking up at him with desperate hope, her eyes shining with a love that transcended all fear. "There's my brave girl," he whispered, continuing his careful descent. "You're doing so good, Emma. Just keep being brave for a few more minutes, and we'll get you out of here." The wooden support beam directly above her ledge was cracked down the middle, held together by what looked like nothing more than splinters and prayer, a testament to its resilience and the precariousness of their situation. Tobias could see that any significant vibration would snap it completely, sending tons of rock down onto his daughter, crushing her beneath its weight. When he reached her level, Tobias carefully positioned himself on the same ledge, distributing his weight as evenly as possible, becoming a counterweight to the forces threatening to tear the mountain apart. Emma immediately tried to throw her arms around him, seeking comfort in his embrace, but he caught her gently, stopping her movement. "Easy, sweetheart. We have to be very careful about how we move. Your leg is hurt, and the mine isn't. Very stable. We need to be as still as possible, like statues carved from stone." Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face, her body trembling with pain and fear. "It hurts really bad, Daddy, and I was so scared when the rock started falling. I thought you wouldn't find me." "I will always find you," Tobias said, his voice thick with emotion, a promise whispered from the depths of his soul. "No matter where you are, no matter how scared you get, Daddy will always come for you. You are my heart, Emma, and I will never let you go." He began working the rope around both of them, creating a secure harness that would allow them to be pulled up together. But as he tightened the knots, ensuring their safety, a new sound echoed through the shaft. The distant rumble of approaching horses, a sound that spelled imminent danger. Through the opening above, Tobias could hear Standing Eagle shouting orders in Apache, his voice filled with urgency. Then the Apache leader's voice called down to him. "Buffalo soldiers approaching, a full cavalry patrol. We have perhaps 3 minutes before they arrive, before this place becomes a battlefield." The implications hit Tobias like a physical blow, a crushing weight on his chest. If the cavalry found 200 Apache warriors on his property, they would assume an attack was in progress, a full-scale Indian raid. They would open fire immediately, turning his farm into a battlefield, a scene of chaos and destruction. And if he and Emma were still trapped in the mine shaft when the shooting started? Standing Eagle's voice echoed down again, more urgent now, his words laced with desperation. "The soldiers will think we are holding you hostage, that you are victims of an Apache abduction. They will not negotiate, they will attack without hesitation. You must come up now before it's too late." But the rope wasn't properly secured yet. Emma's leg needed to be stabilized for the ascent, and the cracked support beam above them was making new sounds, ominous creaking that suggested imminent failure. From above, Tobias could now hear the thunder of cavalry horses getting closer, along with shouted commands and the metallic sound of weapons being readied for battle, a symphony of destruction that heralded their doom. Emma looked up at her father with wide, frightened eyes, her face pale with fear. "Daddy, what's happening? Why do you look so scared? Are they going to hurt us?" Tobias realized they were caught in an impossible situation, a convergence of disasters that threatened to crush them all. If they stayed in the mine to finish the rescue properly, ensuring Emma's safety, they would be trapped underground when the shooting started above, caught in a crossfire between two warring forces. But if they rushed the ascent with an injured child and unstable supports, they could trigger the collapse that would kill them both instantly, burying them alive beneath tons of rock and debris. And somewhere above them, 200 Apache warriors were about to face a cavalry charge, while Standing Eagle tried to explain a situation that no army officer would ever believe. A scenario so bizarre that it defied all logic. The sound of cavalry horses was getting louder, much louder, a deafening roar that filled the air. The cavalry patrol burst into view with military precision. 24 soldiers in blue uniforms, carbines at the ready, led by a young lieutenant whose face went white when he saw 200 Apache warriors arranged in perfect formation around the Whitfield farm, a sight that contradicted everything he knew about Indian warfare. From his position 15 feet underground, Tobias could hear everything through the mine shaft opening, every shout, every command, every click of a weapon being cocked. The lieutenant's voice cracked with nervous authority as he shouted, "This is Lieutenant Morrison of the 5th Cavalry. Release your hostages immediately or we will open fire. We will not tolerate Indian aggression on American soil." Standing Eagle's response is calm and measured, his voice resonating with authority, but Tobias could hear the tension underneath, the desperate attempt to avert a massacre. "We hold no hostages, soldier. We are here on a matter of honor, conducting a rescue. There is a white child trapped in this mine, and we are trying to save her life. I see 200 armed Apache warriors surrounding. The fate of Emma, Tobias, and potentially the fragile peace between settlers and the Apache hangs in the balance." This story reminds us that compassion, understanding, and bridging cultural divides are never easy, but they're always worth fighting for, even when faced with seemingly impossible odds. Sometimes, trusting in the unexpected and choosing courage over fear can lead to remarkable outcomes. What would you do in Tobias's situation? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, or theories about what might happen next. And if you enjoyed this thrilling cliffhanger, please subscribe so you don't miss the next video where we'll finally see if Emma survives and whether Tobias can pass the Apache tests.